What would you do if Jesus asked you to step out of the boat in the middle of a storm? In Matthew 14, we witness one of the most dramatic chapters in the Gospels, a story packed with political intrigue, miraculous provision, and a test of faith that would change everything. Today, we're diving deep into a chapter that includes a tragic execution, impossible miracles, and a moment when one disciple literally walked on water. Our chapter opens in a royal palace with Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee, sitting nervously on his throne. He's been hearing reports about Jesus performing miracles, and he's convinced of something terrifying. John the Baptist has risen from the dead. But why would Herod think this? Let me take you back. John the Baptist, the fearless prophet who baptized Jesus, was in prison, not for a crime, but for speaking truth to power. He had publicly called out Herod for an unlawful marriage. Herod had taken Herodias, his own brother Philip's wife, and John boldly declared, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Think about that courage. John knew the cost of speaking truth, yet he refused to stay silent. Now here's where the story takes a dark turn. At Herod's birthday party, Herodias' daughter, traditionally known as Salome, performs a dance that pleases Herod so much that he makes a reckless promise: "I'll give you whatever you ask, up to half my kingdom." Prompted by her vengeful mother, the girl asks for something horrifying: the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Herod is trapped. He doesn't want to kill John. He actually feared him as a prophet, but his pride, his oath, and his guests watching all pressure him into a terrible decision. John the Baptist, the voice crying in the wilderness, the forerunner of the Messiah, is executed. His disciples take his body, bury it with honor, and go to tell Jesus. This moment teaches us something crucial. Standing for truth can cost us everything. John knew the risk, but he valued truth more than safety. His death foreshadows another innocent execution that's coming: Jesus himself. When Jesus hears about John's death, he withdraws by boat to a solitary place. He's grieving. He's processing the loss of his cousin, his forerunner, his friend. But the crowds won't let him grieve in peace. They follow him on foot from the surrounding towns. Now, here's what's remarkable. Jesus could have sent them away. He had every right to take time for his own sorrow, but Matthew tells us something beautiful. When he stepped ashore and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Even in his own pain, Jesus ministers to others. That's the heart of our Savior. As evening approaches, the disciples come to Jesus with a practical problem. They're in a desolate place. No restaurants, no food trucks, no grocery stores. The crowd is massive, 5,000 men, plus women, plus children. We're talking potentially 15 to 20,000 people. The disciples' solution: send them away so they can buy food in the villages. But Jesus says something that must have seemed absurd. They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. Can you imagine being the disciples in that moment? You look at this massive crowd, you check your resources, and all you have is 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, one boy's lunch for potentially 20,000 people. The disciples respond with what sounds like hopelessness. We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fish. But Jesus says, "Bring them here to me." Watch what happens next. Jesus takes the bread and fish, looks up to heaven, acknowledging where all provision comes from, speaks a blessing, breaks the loaves, and gives them to the disciples. And here's the miracle. It doesn't run out. They keep distributing. 5,000 men, plus women, plus children. Everyone eats. Everyone is satisfied. And when they collect the leftovers, 12 baskets full. Do you see what Jesus is teaching? He's showing that when we bring our limited resources to Him, no matter how inadequate they seem, He can multiply them beyond our imagination. This miracle appears in all 4 Gospels. It's that significant. Jesus is demonstrating that He's greater than Moses, who provided manna in the wilderness. He's showing that He is the bread of life, who can satisfy every hunger. Immediately after this miracle, Jesus does something interesting.
he makes the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismisses the crowd. Then he goes up on the mountain by himself to pray. Even Jesus, God in flesh, withdrew to pray. If he needed that communion with the Father, how much more do we? Meanwhile, the disciples are rowing across the Sea of Galilee. The wind is against them. The waves are buffeting their boat. They're experienced fishermen. They know these waters, but they're struggling. It's between 3 and 6 in the morning, the darkest part of the night, when they see something impossible. Someone is walking towards them, on the water. Put yourself in their sandals. You're exhausted from rowing. The storm is raging, and now you see a figure walking on the waves. What would you think? They think it's a ghost. They cry out in terror. But then they hear a voice. "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." That phrase, "it is I," in Greek is ego eimi, the same phrase God used in Exodus 3:14 when he revealed himself as I am. Jesus is declaring his divinity even in this moment. Now Peter, bold, impulsive Peter, calls out, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus gives a one-word response, "Come." And Peter does something incredible. He gets out of the boat, he puts his foot on the water, and he walks. Let that sink in. Peter is actually walking on water. As long as his eyes are on Jesus, the impossible becomes possible. But then, and this is so human, Peter sees the strength of the wind. He shifts his focus from Jesus to the circumstances, and immediately he begins to sink. "Lord, save me!" Jesus immediately reaches out his hand and catches him. "You of little faith," he says, "why did you doubt?" Now here's what I love about this moment. Jesus calls Peter's faith little, but think about this. All the other disciples stayed in the boat. Peter had enough faith to step out. Yes, he doubted. Yes, he began to sink, but he also walked on water. Sometimes we're so afraid of failing that we never step out of the boat at all. When they climb back into the boat, the wind immediately dies down, and the disciples worship Jesus, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." This is a turning point. They're not just seeing Jesus as a teacher or prophet anymore. They're recognizing his divine authority over nature itself, just as God treads on the waves of the sea in Job 9:8. When they land at Gennesaret, a fertile plain on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee, word spreads quickly. The locals recognize Jesus and send word throughout the surrounding region. And here's what happens. People bring all their sick, everyone who needs healing, and they make one simple request: just let us touch the fringe of his cloak. The fringe, or tassel on Jewish garments, reminded them of God's commandments. It was a symbol of faithfulness. And now people are reaching out to touch it, believing that even contact with Jesus' clothing could heal them. And Matthew tells us all who touched him were healed. All of them, not some, not a percentage, all. This is the power that fed thousands, that walked on water, that calmed the storm. This is the power of the Son of God who came to bring healing to a broken world. So what do we take away from Matthew 14? First, speak truth, even when it's costly. John the Baptist didn't compromise. He spoke truth to power and paid the ultimate price. We're called to that same courage, not recklessly, but faithfully. Second, Jesus multiplies what we offer him. The disciples had 5 loaves and 2 fish, totally inadequate for the task, but they brought it to Jesus anyway. Whatever resources you think you lack, bring them to Jesus. Watch what he does. Third, keep your eyes on Jesus, especially in the storms. When Peter looked at Jesus, he walked on water. When he looked at the wind, he sank. Your circumstances are real, but Jesus is more powerful than any storm you face. Fourth, don't be afraid of failure to keep you in the boat. All the other disciples stayed in the boat. Only Peter stepped out. Yes, he doubted. Yes, he began to sink, but he also walked on water. Fifth, Jesus is compassionate even in his own pain. When Jesus was grieving John's death, he still had compassion on the crowds. When you're hurting, remember that Jesus understands suffering. And sometimes, ministering to others in our pain can be part of our own healing. Sixth, bring your needs to Jesus with faith. The people at Gennesaret believed that just touching Jesus' cloak would heal them, and it did. What are you believing Jesus for today? Bring those needs to Him. Matthew 14 shows us a Jesus who is fully God and fully man. He grieves, He withdraws to pray, but He also walks on water, feeds multitudes with a boy's lunch, and heals everyone who comes to Him. The question this chapter asks us is simple but profound. Will you step out of the boat? Will you bring your inadequate resources to Jesus and trust Him to multiply them? Will you keep your eyes on Him when the storms rage? The same Jesus who reached out and caught Peter is reaching out to you today. If this video encouraged you, hit that like button and subscribe for more biblical teaching.